every kingdom, empire, and monarch that rises ultimately falls, all except for one. This one eternal kingdom has an everlasting God that has revealed himself through a special seal that he's given to the world. But before this eternal kingdom comes, his followers will be stripped of all of their rights, forbidden to buy and sell, and eventually face execution, unless they receive another seal, a mark that gives homage to a different God, the Beast of Revelation. From our prior video, we learned that in the last days, there will be two significant seals or signs.
Now, this week's lesson is entitled The Impending Conflict, and it promises to be a great study as always. Our memory text for this week comes from John 17:17. Sanctify them by your truth. Your word is truth. Now, I don't know about you, but most often when I hear that word for conflict, I usually think of two people who are engaged in a verbal debate or a heated argument. But that's not what the author means when he uses that word for conflict. Nor is it the kind of conflict that the book of Revelation describes at the end of time. Now, don't get me wrong, the war in heaven was actually a war of words. Make no mistake, this battle, this great controversy, started out with words of accusation, slander, and protest. And at the heart of this war was the issue of who is worthy of worship. It truly is a worship war. And at the end of time, the conflict will be between those who have the seal of God versus those who have the mark of the beast. And by the way, how would you know the difference? Does it come down to who has a computer chip in their hand or a barcode on their forehead? Or maybe it has something to do with secret societies and their symbols and handshakes. But what if it were none of that? What if the seal of God and the mark of the beast were different in terms of what, how, and when you worshipped? I mean, after all, how this war got started in the first place. And this brings us to Sunday's lesson because it reminds us that there is a strong, unbreakable connection between the Sabbath of creation and worship. As we talked about earlier this quarter, for us Seventh-day Adventists, what makes God our big G God, the only God worthy of our worship, is the fact that he created us. Satan can never demand our allegiance or our worship because he's not the one who created us. Jesus did that. And because Jesus is our creator, he has the right to demand our loyalty, our obedience, and our worship. As we all know, the Sabbath is a memorial of creation, meaning that every time we come to the seventh day of the week and we stop to rest and to worship, it is a sign, it's like a mark, a witness that tells the world that we believe that it was God who created humanity. It says that we're not here by some random accident that took place millions of years ago, but rather that an all-powerful God created us in his image for a relationship with him. We are here by intention. And every time we worship God on the Sabbath, we are telling the world who it is that we worship, the true God of creation. While God never changes, the same is true of Satan. He doesn't change either. On some level, this makes the enemy, very predictable. For example, we know that he will never stop trying to steal us away from Christ. Now, how does he do that? Well, this is where he is very predictable. There are 4 things that Satan will attempt to do to steal us away from Christ. And by the way, he uses the exact same 4 methods to destroy a church. First, he will try to distract us. Now, I don't know about you, but I've been an Adventist for more than 40 years, and I've never seen such an attack on the spirit of prophecy, the pre-Advent judgment, the nature of the Holy Spirit, or the divinity of Christ. And that's just to name a few. And the hits just keep coming with one conspiracy theory after another. Or they have cooked up some, new theology. Or some internet preacher is trying to find a new date for the second coming of Jesus without calling it, date setting. All of this is designed to distract us from the work that we're supposed to be engaged in. Now, if that doesn't work, Satan will use deception. Now, just like the distractions, this one often comes in the form of false doctrines and theologies, such as the attack on the divinity and nature of Jesus. If you want to split a church or lead people astray, hit them with some supposed new light and just see what happens. And if that doesn't work, then he will hit believers with discouragement, meaning he will use persecution on a social level to attack you. People will lie about you or falsely accuse you. They may try to get you, fired from your job. And if that doesn't work, and this is the last one Satan will try, and that is to destroy Christians through physical persecution, leading to imprisonment and or death. Now, here's what you need to know. At the very end of time, Satan will use all four tactics all at once against God's people. It will be a level of persecution the world's never seen before. Why? Because Satan knows that his time's up, and now it's all-out war. And if he's going to die, then he's going to take as many people down with him as he can. We know that the coming war has already started. Right now, Satan is launching his attack against God's church through distraction and deception. But soon, his tactics will shift to discouragement in the form of economic sanctions where you can't buy, sell, or work. You will either accept the false day of worship or they will block access to your bank account. And if that doesn't work, then they will imprison or attempt to kill God's people. So the question becomes, how do we stay faithful to the end? And as the lesson points out, it's simple. You follow the Lamb wherever he goes. So much so that one day you will follow him right into heaven itself. If someone were to ask you, how does one go about identifying the beast of Revelation? What would you tell them? Well, personally, I'd start out by sharing with them that one of the keys to understanding Bible prophecy is to remember that the Bible explains itself. And that's a good thing because the book of Revelation has a lot of symbols in it. But if you pay attention and you read everything in context, sooner or later the Bible will tell you what all those symbols mean. Now, added to this, I often tell people that another key to understanding Revelation is that 70% of Revelation is made up of direct quotes or references from the Old Testament, which means that if you want to understand the book of Revelation, you need to read and understand the Old Testament. So what does this have to do with the beast of Revelation? Everything. Now, let me explain. In the Bible, the great red dragon is Satan himself. Now, how do we know this? Because Revelation 12:9 says that the dragon was cast out of heaven, that old serpent, the devil. You see what I mean? The Bible told us what and who the dragon symbolically represents. Okay, that's an easy one. But what about the beast? Well, there are some 12 clues in the Bible that help us to identify the beast. Things such as, it's both a religious and a political power. That it would be in power for 1,260 years. That while it had great power, it would actually be a very small country. And that country would be located somewhere, in Europe. That it would try to change the laws of God. That it would persecute anyone who tried to stay faithful to God. Now, there are other clues, but already we have enough information to figure this out. All you have to do is go to the history books, and you will see that according to both world and church history, there is only one religious political power over in Europe, that fits this description. Now, you might be surprised, but according to Bible prophecy, this beast power didn't start out as a beast. It actually started out as the Christian church. And as the lesson points out, historians will tell us that when Emperor Justinian transferred the power of his throne over to the Christian church in 538 AD, it completely corrupted the church. The corruption and apostasy was so great that the church went from being the bride of Christ and it transformed into the prostitute of Babylon. The beast of Revelation is none other than the apostate fallen Christian church of the Dark Ages. It came into power in 538 AD, and its rule ended 1,260 years later in 1798, just as the Bible predicted. Today, you would know this religious political power as Papal Rome. And the greatest blasphemy this beast power committed was its claim to have the power to change God's laws and to have the power to forgive people their sins. Well, now you might be thinking, how could it make such a claim? It did so because it claimed to be what Satan always wanted to be. It claimed to be God on earth. And heaven help anyone who would dare to challenge its authority both in the past and once again in the near future. Now, I understand that for some of you, yesterday's lesson might have been a bit of a shock to learn that the beast power of Revelation actually started out as the Christian church. Now, where do we get this from? Well, we get it from both Bible prophecy and the history of the Christian church. Now, I don't have a lot of time to go into great detail, but can I suggest you take up a Bible study on the 7 churches of Revelation? What we know is that each church represents an era or 7 time periods in the history of the church. Remember, the book of Revelation concerns itself with the relationship between Jesus and his church. Okay, 7 churches represent 7 literal time periods in the history of the church. The third church we come to is Pergamus, which would represent a period of time in the church between 313 and 538 AD. This is when Emperor Constantine made Christianity the official religion of the empire. Persecution of the church stopped, and the church enjoyed something, well, it hadn't enjoyed in hundreds of years, namely peace and prosperity. Now, in order to keep the peace, it started to make compromises with pagan religions of the empire. And before you know it, pagan beliefs and practices entered the Christian church. Now we come to the next church, which is Thyatira. This era of church history would last from 538 to 1798 AD. And if you do the math, well, that's 1,260 years. This 1,260-year time period represented the era of corruption and apostasy. Again, as the lesson points out, this corruption took place shortly after Emperor Justinian transferred all of his political power and authority over to the Christian church. And again, how did the Christian church come into this power? The emperor gave it to them. Historians would record that this act gave the Bishop of Rome, or the Pope of Rome, both religious and political power on a scale the world had never seen before. And with this newfound power, this church became what Jesus said it would become, a corrupted and persecuting church. And as the bride of Christ became a prostitute and would remain a prostitute until Jesus would return. But there's more to the story, because there were those who did not apostatize, nor did they seek out or become corrupted by political power. These people would stay true to the Word of God, and they would speak out against the abuses of this apostate church. Make no mistake, God has always had a people who were true to him and had remained the spotless bride of Christ. Now you might be wondering, why is this so important? Because according to Bible prophecy, history is going to repeat itself. A time is coming when Protestant Christianity will join forces with political and state powers, and when it does, it will take on an image to the very beast it once ran away from. And we're told that the apostate Protestant churches will join forces with Papal Rome and world governments, and when they do, they will once again persecute God's true people. Because make no mistake, God always has and God always will have a true church. But more about that, Thursday's lesson asks a very important question. How does the second beast differ from the first beast? Well, in Revelation. Well, just like the first beast, there are biblical clues that can be verified by history. And those clues can help us to identify, well, who this second beast is. Here's what we know. The first beast comes up out of the sea, and the second beast comes up out of the earth. Now we know that the sea and waters represent people. And by that we mean a lot of people, or a very densely populated part of the earth. In contrast to that, A place of dry earth would represent a place with a lot less people in it. The first beast has horns with crowns, representing kingdoms ruled by kings, queens, or popes. And the second beast, well, he has lamb-like horns with no crowns, meaning it would not be ruled by kings, queens, or popes. Instead, its system of government would be unlike anything the world had seen before. Now add to this the fact that it comes up on the world scene around the mid to late 1700s. Now, can you think of a country that came onto the world scene around the 1700s that had a system of government run by the people rather than a monarchy or a church? And there's only one country that historically fits that description, and it's the United States of America. Now, we know that even though the United States of America was not ruled by a church, it was in fact a Christian nation. Today, we refer to it as Protestant America because the people who established this country had fled the persecution of papal Rome, over in Europe. And they wanted a country built on the principles of religious freedom. And they were Protestants. And they wanted people to be free to worship God as they saw fit. The idea of a country where there was a wall of separation between the church and the state would get you killed over in Europe. But in this country, a wall that separated the church and the state was foundational, to its government. But according to Bible prophecy, this is where the differences, they would end. Because the Bible predicts that this beast with lamb-like horns would one day change, and not for the better. One day it would change and transform into an image of the very beast it once ran away from. 180 years ago, people laughed at us Seventh-day Adventists when we predicted that one day the United States of America would become a world superpower. Now, it's easy to understand why they would laugh at that idea, back in the 1800s. When the U.S. was hardly a country, let alone, a military superpower. But today, nobody's laughing. Because not only is America a superpower, but if you listen very carefully, it's beginning to sound a lot like the first beast.